Hi, I'm Pam Fox. I'm just going to make sure that I'm indeed live, and I am. Hi, I'm Pam Fox. Hey, Paul, at pamfox.org. And today I've got a question from David. This was posted on the discussion panel on my website. And thanks, Paul. And David says, hi Pam, I followed your exercises and learned how to pull my stomach down and can automatically feel the difference it makes. The problem is it goes back into position the following day or two. Is there a way I can keep it down? Sometimes I'm sore after a session and I don't want to put too much strain on my body. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about well, one, I'm going to answer that question. There's two things you need to focus on in order to keep your stomach down. If you have a hiatal hernia and you've learned how to move your stomach down or unherniate your hernia, there are two ways to keep it down. But we're going to mostly be focusing on session 2, if you go back and review that, there are 16 different forms of intragastric pressure, and these are some of the things that we do on the reg, that we do on a daily basis, that we maybe have been doing for months or even years. Okay, that need to be identified and addressed. So this is foundational to my course, this identifying and addressing the things that either cause or support a hiatal hernia. It's very foundational. If someone were to tell you you need to do steps 1, 2, and 3 in order to achieve this goal, but you skip step 1 and only do steps 2 and 3, or you just kind of don't put a lot of emphasis on step 1, step 1 in my course is highly foundational to a more comprehensive protocol, and you really have to pay attention to these things and really be aware of them and be more aware of them day by day, being more in tune with your body and these different things that can be occurring that actually and literally push your stomach upward. Okay, so the two things that you can do to keep your stomach down are, one, what I just talked about, identifying and addressing the different forms of intragastric pressure, and 2 is getting your diaphragm as healthy and as strong as possible so that that hiatus, the hole in which the stomach herniates through, is nice and tight, and so there's no longer any room for a reherniation to occur. However, if you follow me, you know I talk a lot about pre-hiatal hernias, which is where for a long period of time the stomach is being pressed up against the diaphragm, but not necessarily through the diaphragm. When it presses through, it's a hiatal hernia. But it doesn't usually just pop up into your diaphragm like overnight. While sudden hiatal hernias do occur, they're more of the rarity. So these would be a hiatal hernia caused by trauma. And for a lot of people, a hiatal hernia has really come about from a variety of things that are occurring. Maybe there was a little bit of trauma. Maybe, you've always had a weak diaphragm because you're sedentary. Maybe you have some of these other issues that cause intragastric pressure, and they all combine together to create, the perfect storm that's constantly pushing your stomach up into your diaphragm, okay? And so you can have similar symptoms of a hiatal hernia without even having a hiatal hernia. So a lot of times people will say, I was sure I had a hiatal hernia, I went and got checked, and they couldn't find one. It's so confusing because I have all of these symptoms from hiatal hernia, like textbook symptoms. And so this is just my theory. This isn't something being spoke about by doctors or in that realm, but just think about it from a logical point of view. If you have forms of intragastric pressure that are always pushing your stomach up, where your stomach meets where the stomach meets the esophagus, we have that lower esophageal sphincter, and so if you've got pressure on that valve. And remember, when it comes to many of the symptoms of hiatal hernia, not all of them, but many of the most common ones, like reflux, for example. Reflux is simply the contents of the stomach moving upward through that valve, right? They're not supposed to. So if we've got pressure on the valve, then you're going to have more likelihood of reflux occurring. So you can learn how the different things you're doing that are pushing your stomach up. That's one way to keep your stomach down and you can get your diaphragm as healthy as possible. But as you continue to have these different forms of intragastric pressure, even if you have unherniated your stomach, in my opinion, you can still have the same symptoms of a hiatal hernia because you're pressing your stomach against your diaphragm. So we want to keep the stomach down. We want to keep it down where it belongs, underneath the diaphragm, and not always crammed up. And remember too, if a stomach is always getting pushed upward, like maybe from being overweight, that's one of the, you've got a lot of overcrowding within the abdominal cavity. That stomach could always be in a position where it's like squished or even folded. It can be twisted. And so this can put pressure on both the vagus nerve and the lower esophageal sphincter. Okay, so let's go through some of these different, I keep freezing up. Sorry about that. We'll wait just a second. Okay. So Paul says 95% are the sliding kind. Yeah, sliding hiatal hernias, that's the most common. And then he says, my hernia wasn't found until your second endoscopy. Yeah. Yeah, and that can be, oh, we're having a horrible connection. Sorry about that, guys. We'll just wait a minute. I'll keep talking and hopefully you can hear me. There we go. The hiatal hernias can be missed, and that can be for a variety of reasons. That particular day, your stomach might be a little bit calmer and not pushing up quite so high. You might, your technician might be off that day and just, didn't get the right image. Darn it. Okay, so let's go through some of these. So the first things that you really want to pay attention to are inflammation, bloating, and constipation. And usually these are diet related, although they could be conditionally related as well. If you have a bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, if you have gastritis, some of these different conditions that create a lot of inflammation in the gut, and so these need to be addressed, and when it comes to conditions of the digestive tract, you've got to start with what you're eating, right? There may be some other, therapeutic things, obviously, that you need to be doing, like hydrating and getting good rest and meditating, managing your stress. Supplements come into play. Even medications can come into play, but you can't just disregard what you're eating. You can't just disregard what's going in your mouth. That includes food, that includes beverages, that includes medications, right? They all have effect within your internal system, especially your digestive tract, because that's where all of that stuff's going first, right? That's where it's processed. So as far as bloating goes, obviously, if your stomach is expanding all of the time with bloating, that can create the stomach a movement upward, that bloating and pressing into the diaphragm, whether it's pressing through or not. Constipation, if you're always constipated and having to bear down in order to pass bowel movement, that's going to put upward pressure on your stomach, push it upward towards the diaphragm or through the diaphragm. So Damien mentions, I'm in the situation where the symptoms of hiatal hernia goes but come back at some point, even when I thought it is gone. Yeah, and so that's what we're talking about today, Damon. I mean, you could have, a flare-up of some type of inflammation due to, it could be a medication you're taking, it could be something you ate. And so pay attention. We're going to go through some of these different things that can cause the stomach to move back up again, and it's that stomach pressing up against the diaphragm or through the diaphragm that's going to start to cause those symptoms. As long as your stomach is down and under the diaphragm, you shouldn't have any symptoms. So you have to learn how to keep your stomach down. And what we're talking about today is ways that you can keep your stomach down, both by addressing what's pushing it up and eliminating that. And also, I mentioned before, making sure your diaphragm is as healthy and as strong as possible. And that's later on in the course, is focusing on how to strengthen the diaphragm. But this is foundational to the protocol. It's making sure you're understanding the things that you may be doing on a daily basis that are pushing your stomach up. All right, so some of these next ones are just, kind of real obvious things like tight clothing or poor posture. or pulling in your abs. So all of these things push the stomach in, they pull the belly in, and they increase the pressure in the abdomen. Okay, so you pull in your abs, you suck in your gut, it pushes your stomach up. You slouch, it moves your diaphragm down and your stomach up. You sleep in the fetal position, same thing, diaphragm down, stomach up. Maybe when you drive, you kind of drive like this instead of sitting up tall or maybe reclining back. All of these things push the stomach up. I mentioned straining while passing a bowel movement. That puts tremendous pressure on the stomach and pushes it up. So again, if these are things you're doing, they're just common things that you do, then you've got a lot of ongoing repeated pressure pushing your stomach up. The next three are frequent sneezing, frequent coughing, and frequent vomiting. So any of these are also going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on your stomach every time you sneeze, every time you cough, every time you vomit. And for some people these aren't an issue, but if you have chronic allergies and you're constantly sneezing all the time, if you have, a persistent cough that never goes away, which is really kind of a cyclical thing because it can be a symptom of a hiatal hernia, a frequent cough can be. So it's just this evil cycle. And then frequent vomiting. So these are things that need to be addressed, because as long as you're, if you're just going to be sneezing multiple times all day, every day, then you're going to constantly be putting pressure on your stomach and pushing it upward. So I already mentioned being overweight. This is just simply an overcrowding issue within the abdominal cavity, excess fat within the abdominal cavity and enlarged omentum could just put additional pressure on your stomach. Same thing with binge eating. When you binge eat, it puts additional substance within your stomach and it creates overcrowding, and it can cause that stomach to push against the diaphragm. Heavy lifting is a big one. Some people lift all day, every day as part of their occupation. Some people love to go to the gym and lift heavy weights. Maybe you're a young mother and you have children that you're always picking up. So these things that you don't really think about, they engage the abdominal muscles. The abdominal muscles contract and it pushes your stomach up. So I've also got, I've got other stuff here, pregnancy obviously causes overcrowding and can push the stomach up, but that's not really something, have a lot of control over. So there's just a few more here. I already went over pulling the abs in to appear thin, abdominal constriction brought on by stress. That's a big one too. Like stress, muscle contraction is a response mechanism to stress. So if you're mad, if you're irritated, if you're scared, if you're cold, if you're, worried, these different things that happen, all day long, every day for most of us on some level. Muscle contraction is a natural response to that. So you have to really be aware of that. You have to be aware what your muscles are doing. Like when you're feeling stressed or you're feeling particularly symptomatic, you notice that stomach, all your symptoms were fine yesterday and now today it feels like it's pushing up and you're having a lot of pressure at the herniated site and you're having all these symptoms. Ask yourself, am I under a lot of stress right now? If I wanted to really just relax my muscles, could I? And if you notice this big release of tension let go when you try that, then your muscles were really contracted. If you try to relax the muscles in your stomach and you can just feel a lot of tension let go, that means that those stomach muscles were just contracting and pushing your stomach up. So this is something that just takes time that you have to become more aware of through practice. Start to kind of pay attention when you're symptomatic. What are my abs doing? What are my muscles doing? Thank you. Let's see. Juliet asks, may I ask if you believe in surgery or not, depending on how bad the hiatal hernia is? Well, when it comes to surgery, Juliet, that's a decision that each individual has to make on their own, based on their own experiences, their own situation. I personally believe there is a time and a place for surgery. I know that a lot of people want to exhaust all alternative or maybe natural, methods first before they go that route for obvious reasons. With any surgery, there are risks involved. When it comes to a hiatal hernia surgical repair, I just lost my connection, so I'm going to wait just a second. When it comes to a hiatal hernia surgical repair, all you have to do is join one of the hiatal hernia support groups, and you will see for yourself across the board people's experiences with these surgeries. So you need to get a really good, experienced, trustworthy surgeon, and even then there's no guarantee that everything's going to go according to plan. So unfortunately, you do hear a lot of horror stories when it comes to these surgical repairs, and you hear a lot of stories where eventually the hernia comes back, so they're not always permanent. And that makes sense. That makes sense because, you know, if we look through this list of these different forms of intragastric pressure and we understand that these things are occurring in our lifestyle all the time, you know, we kind of identify the different things that are relevant to me, then we realize that if I don't address these foundational things and then I go have surgery and I continue to have these different forms of intragastric pressure, what's going to happen? The stomach is going to keep getting pushed up against the diaphragm, and eventually it may even re-herniate, even though you've had a surgical repair, which does happen, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, I totally think there's a time and a place for surgery. I know usually the people that are listening to me, the people that are interested in what I have to say, are people who want to try to avoid the surgical route if at all possible. And they're trying to exhaust alternatives to surgery before they go that route. Certainly if you have, you know, an emergency, you know, like a strangulated hernia, that's a time and a place for surgery. That surgery could save your life. And I'm sure there are other cases as well where it would be necessary. A very large hiatal hernia would be a case. I definitely would, I personally would look into surgery if I had a very large hiatal hernia and it was really affecting my life. That's where a large portion of your stomach is in your chest cavity and it's putting pressure on your lungs and your heart, and messing with your digestion, and you know, so and again, if you go into the hiatal hernia support groups, you will see some people have been thrilled, just life-changing miracle. You know, they say the surgery has just been a wonderful thing, and I'm happy for those people, and I hope that it will be long-lasting for them. I tell my friends about you. I learned how to breathe through your methods. Awesome. Root cause needs to be fixed. Yeah, like gas pressure from SIBO. Yeah, so there are a lot of different digestive disorders. So and a lot of times they go hand in hand with hiatal hernia. So, you know, to just have a hiatal hernia and be perfectly healthy otherwise, I mean, I'm sure it happens, but in my opinion, it's probably more of a rarity. Usually you have other digestive issues that go with the hiatal hernia, okay? And SIBO is one of them. And it's very foundational to, if you want to reverse your hiatal hernia, if anyone comes to me and they have SIBO, I will tell them right away, you need to address that first. If you want to reverse your hiatal hernia, you have to address your SIBO first. Same thing with something like gastritis, right? Now, esophagitis is something that will, begin to heal after you reverse your hiatal hernia. Of course, you want to address your esophagitis while you're reversing your hiatal hernia. But yeah, hiatal hernia and other digestive conditions oftentimes go hand in hand. So yeah, you need to understand what those are and make sure you're addressing each and every one of them. Okay, so that's it for today. So if you're new to me, make sure you hit the follow button here on my Facebook page. And if you want more information about me or my products and services, you can check me out at my website, pamfox.org, where I do have my online Reverse Your Hiatal Hernia Naturally course. I also have the maintenance course for strengthening and keeping the diaphragm strong, and other things too as well. So I'll do one final question. Damien asks, how do I know when my stomach has finally gone down in the position and is in the normal position? Well, usually what I say to people is you'll know because you'll experience relief. That's what most people, that was my experience And that's what a lot of people tell me. Like they'll get, when that stomach comes out of that herniated position, particularly if you're doing these exercises while you're symptomatic. So you're symptomatic, you're doing the exercises, you're miserable. Maybe you're burping and you're nauseous and you've got these different symptoms. And you're doing the exercises, then you just have a wave of this relief come over you. And that's usually when you know you've either gotten your stomach down and away from your diaphragm or out of that herniated position. Now, it doesn't always mean you'll have a complete 100% relief in your symptoms. For example, if your hiatal hernia is causing LPR symptoms, which are up higher in the throat, you're not going to immediately have your sore throat vanish just because you moved your stomach out of your diaphragm. That's going to take time for those tissues to heal, and that's a whole nother video. But things like, if you're having reflux or belching or nausea or indigestion, those types of symptoms, and you get that stomach down and out of the diaphragm, a lot of people experience instant relief, so you'll know. Others will say that they hear and or feel kind of a popping sensation where the stomach comes out of the diaphragm. Others have said that they felt a really strong, sharp pain when the stomach came out of the herniated position. And that can be for a couple of reasons. You're pulling that stomach out, pull, and it finally kind of releases, or you could be detaching some of the peritoneal attachments and you feel that sharp pain. So I mean, when it's down, you should feel better. It should feel better if it's under your diaphragm. But like David's asking today, it can move back up very, very easily, very, very easily. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have further questions, I will try to respond to those in the comment feed. So go ahead and leave your comments or questions posted below. Thanks for watching.